Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this Decline decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And while my video earlier today was more of a, oh my god, why do things have to get worse sometimes, it actually turns out that while Elon Musk does fire from the hip, that does mean we get some good along with some of the bad. It's mostly just mez though, to be honest, but the good stuff can end up being really good, as is the case here. So, as I'm sure everyone knows, Elon Musk has been firing all over Twitter for the past few days. In fact, he pinned this particular tweet to his feed asking people to go and read the court transcripts for, I believe this was the Oxford gang, and it is really horrible stuff. It's worse than you can possibly imagine. And obviously he's been having a go at Labour MPs such as Jess Phillips and obviously Keir Starmer, who are people that, you know, especially with Jess Phillips, she seems involved in dealing with this sort of thing. You know, rape of girls tends to be a wheelhouse given she's Minister for Safeguarding Girls Against Violence. And Starmer was obviously head of the CPS at the time, the Crown Prosecution Service, who typically are the people who charge for crimes like this. And so he's constantly asking, why has nothing been done about this? Why is there not a national inquiry? Things like that. And it's all questions that I'm very happy he's asking, because he does have the biggest reach on Twitter and therefore has quite a bit of influence. And so Keir Starmer finally decided to address these in a conference speech that was supposed to be about the NHS, but obviously this is something that can't be ignored. And we're going to go through his answer, so take it away, Mr. Starmer.
On the question of Elon Musk, look, I think most people are more interested in what's going to happen to the NHS, frankly, than what's happening on Twitter.
It's X now, Sir Starmer, but no, I'm totally with him. Everyone still calls it Twitter. But that's just obviously not true. It's obviously not true. Obviously you get the articles all over the mainstream about how the NHS sucks and things like that, but every other article, in fact, even articles about the NHS, somewhere in the article you are likely to see a tweet as a source. What happens on Twitter is what happens in the real world. And obviously people need to get their head around this also means that there are echo chambers which are on Twitter, which, you know, do affect the real world to some extent, but not as much as they think. However, I get really fed up with people saying that Twitter isn't the real world and nobody really cares, when one, every newspaper obviously cares what happens on Twitter, and two, I don't know how many people need to go to jail for quote-unquote hate speech and how much non-crime hate incidents need to exist before we realise that that stuff tended to get quite popular over on Twitter and managed to influence the civil service and our lawmakers and the College of Policing to actually make it a real thing. And so now it's a bit more open to the right wing on Twitter, we'll say. Obviously, right wing issues like this are finally coming to the mainstream. Hence, he has been forced to answer this question, and already he's made an idiot of himself.
And let me start with this. Child sexual exploitation is utterly sickening.
Well done. I am glad that you think that industrial-scale paedophilia and gangs involved in it are terrible people. I do agree. I very much agree. Thank you for having that conviction, Sir Starmer.
And for many, many years, too many victims have been completely let down by perverse ideas about community relations, or by the idea that institutions must be protected above all else.
Right, so there's a bit of the core issue actually being addressed here for once. I mean, this whole thing of, oh, there's this perverse idea that community relations, i.e. race relations, need to be brought about above all else. Well, firstly, I'd like to address that. No, it's not perverse, it's literally in law. This is Section 6 of the 1965 Race Relations Act, that act that, in that infamous speech in Birmingham that involved rivers of blood, was pointed out to possibly be a bit of a disaster. But anyway, Section 6. A person shall be guilty of an offence under this section, incitement to, if, with intent to stir up racial hatred against any section of public in racial hatred, Great Britain distinguished by colour, race, or ethnic or national origins, he publishes or distributes written matter which is threatening, abuse, or insulting, or he uses in any public place or any public meeting words which are threatening, abuse, or insulting, being matter or words likely to stir up hatred against a section on grounds of colour, race, or ethnic or national origins. And I could read through the rest of this act, but this was the main bit I wanted to bring up. It has been law literally since 1965 that you effectively can't incite racial hatred, quote-unquote, whatever the hell that means. And so this is the problem. When you say there are Pakistani grooming gangs, for instance, no matter how accurate that statement is, and I want to make it clear to the British law and British police that I am not necessarily saying it, I'm quoting other people saying it, that can obviously be deemed as racial hatred because It's not such a massive step, although it is very dishonest, to say that you are trying to stir up hatred toward people distinguished by their ethnic or national origins. And that is against the 1965 Act, which was replaced by the 1973 Act, I want to say, which effectively just expanded these laws, and then obviously was all repealed when the Equality Act came in, which then applied this very same law to sex and other immutable characteristics. So yeah, the Equality Act is a massive issue, and guess who's going to do nothing about it as well as Keir Starmer? Yes, that's right, Kemi Badenoch. This is why you need to vote reform. Anyway, as I was making the point here, it is not perverse, it is not the wrong idea, it has literally been in British law for over 50 years, so let's make that clear. But also then, Keir Starmer obviously addresses the, institutions need to be protected. I mean, I'm not being funny, but as we will go through in this speech, it is clear that the institutions, above all else, need to be protected. And, I'll wait till he gets to the line to address that properly.
And they've not been listened to, and they've not been heard.
Right, so you agree with Elon Musk that this is absolutely a disaster and needs to be addressed, right? Thank you for that. That is very good news.
And when I was chief prosecutor for 5 years, I tackled that head on because I could see what was happening.
I mean, well, this is a bit of a problem, Sir Keir, because, okay, you're chief prosecutor between, I can't remember the years exactly, I think it was 2008 to 2013, and 2011 was really where grooming gangs as a national scandal really started to break. So at the last 2 years of your time as chief prosecutor, where you have all this experience of how to prosecute people, absolutely, sure, you've had some of these grooming gangs go to court and go to jail, and that's absolutely fine, but we need to see more of it because this was town-wide in some areas. We're talking tens of thousands of people that need to go to jail or be deported. And also, we need to talk about the people who were helped covering up, the people in the institutions. No one in those positions have gone to jail at all, or even seen a day in court. And it is going to raise questions of, if you were chief prosecutor, why was that never addressed? Because we have inquiries that do point fingers at people in institutions, in the police, in councils, who are covering this stuff up. Why have they never faced a day in court?
And that's why I reopened cases that had been closed and supposedly finished. I brought the first major prosecution of an Asian grooming gang. In the particular case, it was in Rochdale, but it was the first of its kind. There were many that then followed that format. I changed the whole prosecution approach because I wanted to challenge and did challenge the myths and stereotypes that were stopping those victims being heard. So we changed the entire approach, not without criticism at the time, I might add. And when I left office, we had the highest number of child sexual abuse cases being prosecuted on record.
Again, let's assume all that's true. Let's just take his word for it. It still begs the question of why were the people who were covering this up and hiding this, why were they not punished? Sure, don't get me wrong, I am fine that you have taken some grooming gangs to court, that's fine, but obviously these are problems that are town-wide, these are issues that are frankly still ongoing, these are issues that keep being hidden, and I think it took a judge to die for the Oxford notes to come out, and this is why it became such a large issue. Why is this still happening? And you can say that you've changed the culture and everything, but really at the end of the day, this is all to do with the psychology of Brits. It doesn't look like an awful lot has really been done because people know that this still goes on, people know who covered it up are still out there free, and obviously people that probably have been prosecuted while Keir Starmer was head of the CPS are now released because the sentences got shortened. And there are victims of these men who have seen them just walking about the town free, and that frankly should never have happened. And this is why you need to vote reform, because they will actually deport people with dual nationality.
I also called for mandatory reporting of child sexual abuse. I called for that a decade ago. The Tories did nothing about that for those 10 long years, including when the J report came out nearly 3 years ago now. Central plank, mandatory reporting, still hasn't been done. We're going to do it.
Well, it's interesting that you finally came along to say that, because the thing is here is, yeah, sure, nobody thinks the Tories have their hands clean of this absolute nonsense. They've been in charge for 14 years and didn't do anything close to what was needed to do about this. But now we're talking about reporting the facts. And the thing is that, there have been news reports all over the place that have tried to report this and have it suppressed. None of that is being addressed. Not only that, when it is reported in, say, the BBC, it's only in local news, despite the fact it's a national scandal. And then not only that, Channel 4 had their documentary on this issue pulled years ago because they were worried about community tensions. None of that's being addressed. No, this is Keir Starmer saying, oh, see, I wanted mandatory reporting, but I knew it wouldn't happen, and now trust me, bro, this time around I'm definitely going to do it. And the only reason he's probably going to do it this time around is, if he does do it, is due to the massive pressure from Twitter. Which, again, you know, as much as my video earlier today was criticising Musk, he also does good things as well, like forcing Starmer to talk about this, which is good to see.
But let's just to bring it in closer, and I will answer you on Jess Phillips in particular, because those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims, they're interested in themselves.
There are absolutely people who do that, but realistically, the only reason this is being brought up is to try and deflect criticism, so I'm just not having it.
Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson, not interested in justice.
No, I don't think that this is necessarily fair to say. There are absolutely issues with Tommy Robinson, and in my last video I make some of them quite clear from my personal perspective. But people who say, you know, Tommy Robinson was covering this sort of thing, it's incredible how it took Tommy Robinson to help push some of these news stories. You know, these people are interested in justice. They just don't know all the details behind why Tommy Robinson might not necessarily be a good messenger for this sort of thing. But again, it's just a deflection. Oh, you see these people, they're associated with Tommy Robinson, and instantly, to most people, it will just discredit anything that they are saying. And this is another reason why I just don't associate with him and don't really bother defending him, even on the odd occasion he does deserve defending, because it's unfortunate, don't get me wrong, but it just doesn't get you anywhere. So that's why I don't bother, but it is absolutely wrong to say that everyone who supports Tommy Robinson isn't interested in justice. That's obviously nonsense. Elon Musk obviously wants justice for these girls.
They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case.
Yeah, that was a massive mistake by Tommy Robinson, but to be fair, I see people who support Tommy Robinson even accepting that he did that, so those types of people aren't too bad, but those that say, oh, that's all trumped up charge and things like that, no, he nearly screwed up a court case to convict grooming gangers. That's just not acceptable. But again, this is all deflection anyway. Keep on topic, please.
These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson promote.
This is one of those criticisms I don't think is entirely fair. There have been plenty of protests that Tommy Robinson has run that have gone perfectly peacefully and not instigated any violence. There has also been the opposite that is true, but from what I'm aware, not for some years. But no, it's ridiculous to try and say that someone like, I don't know, Elon Musk is trying to instigate violence in British streets. That's obviously not happening in this case. Again, it's all deflection. Let's stay on topic.
And those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, not protecting victims, Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse throughout her entire career.
I mean, I could turn this into a whole Jess Phillips is actually terrible video, but luckily I've actually done that before, link in the description. Because Jess Phillips is absolutely the epitome of the two-tier system we have in Britain, where it will be a case of whenever it's criminals who are not these groups that we are talking about with this grooming gang, attacking news reporters or committing other sorts of crimes against herself and her canvassers, by the way, her team of election campaigners, you know, some of them got their tyres slashed by pro-Gaza protesters. It's never addressed what's actually causing these issues. It's always just, oh, it's men. But when she says men, she usually just means British men. It's never any other type. And this is proven in the video that I suggest you all watch. It's called Jess Phillips Must Resign. It's in the description. Because there is just scant evidence everywhere that, no, Jess Phillips is actually part of the two-tier issue that you have. So to say that you massively support her, yeah, it's telling me everything I need to know, frankly.
And so just as I took on the criminal justice system and the institutions when I was chief prosecutor, I'm prepared to call out this for what it is.
Cripes, this is going to be good. Go on. Is this just going to be more far-right thuggery?
We've seen this playbook many times. Whipping up of intimidation and threats of violence.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching this whole episode play out on Twitter and in the media for the past week or so. I've not seen any instigation of violence anywhere. I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but again, this is just bleating back to the mainstream news what they want to hear, so they're just going to lap it up. And this is why Twitter is important, even if it's imperfect.
Hoping that the media will amplify it?
Don't really need the media to amplify things these days, to be honest, and obviously the media have avoided amplifying it, despite the fact that, as he said, he Starmer apparently wanted mandatory reporting on this sort of thing. The only place I saw any of these Oxford sentencing or judgment or court notes, whatever they're called, anywhere in the mainstream news, GB News only. It's the only place I saw it. So don't give me this nonsense of, oh, they're just hoping that the media say things that will incite violence. No, GB News actually did what we wanted, and there's been no violence. So, you know, keep up with your ridiculous accusations, Sir Starmer. You're making Elon Musk look sensible.
Now, Jess Phillips does not need me or anybody else to speak on her behalf. But when the poison of the far right leads to serious threats to Jess Phillips and others...
To be fair here, there is always going to be mad people online who probably are sending this sort of thing. Obviously, that sort of thing's very, very bad. But all these big main voices over in America and here in Britain, there's been no advocacy of violence against any of these people. So yeah, weirdo Anons online with sub 1,000 followers, just, yeah, I'm sure some of them went too far, and fine, arrest them for making these threats. I'm absolutely fine with that. But again, this is all just deflection from the issue at hand, and it's really pathetic.
Then in my book, a line has been crossed. I enjoy the cut and thrust of politics, the robust debate that we must have, but that's got to be based on facts and truth, not on lies.
I mean, again, it's worth bearing in mind that all of this has exploded from effectively Max Tempers publishing some of the worst parts of the Oxford gang's court notes. I mean, what, are we going to say that that's not true? Don't get me wrong, I know there's a load of fluff and not all of it will be true, but again, this is what one of the problems is with Twitter and Musk to an extent. It's, yeah, the core of what he's talking about really does matter, but that he just, because he fires from the hip, there is just so much stuff he posts that is either not true or actively harms his case that they can just latch onto it. This is the problem with the left. They still have cultural control as much as that is being weakened, and because of that, you just do not have leeway to give them any ammunition whatsoever. And unfortunately, Elon Musk did. Hence, this is Starmer's ability to deflect, but at the very least, he's getting him to address it. And as we can see, he's going for all the deflections. So, as far as I'm concerned, this isn't going to help him in any way.
Not on those who are so desperate for attention that they're prepared to debase themselves and their country.
So, Elon Musk is now just a person who is attention-seeking. I don't think the richest person in the world has attention-seeking as one of his core needs that he needs fulfilling. He can talk about literally anything on Twitter and he'll get hundreds of thousands of likes. He does not need to talk about this for attention. He needs to talk about this because he feels there is an injustice, as a lot of us do, Sir Keir.
So this government will get on with the job of protecting victims, including child sexual abuse.
I'm not being funny, but pretty much every survivor who has had the courage to talk about this publicly on interviews and on Twitter, basically the conclusion I have come to from all the things they have said is that basically they have never felt that has been the case. And I don't think they trust you to be the person to change that, despite everything you said before.
But what I won't tolerate is this discussion and debate based on lies without calling it out.
Again, yeah, there's probably a couple of things that weren't quite true from Elon Musk, but pretty much everything I saw when he was talking specifically about the grooming gangs, totally fine. Hell, pretty much every time he'd have a source that wasn't total nonsense. It was either directly from the court documents or a mainstream source. The odd times it would obviously be from a Twitter anon, but again, they would have an actual source within their tweet. So yeah, it's every time it's just they're lying. That's all they can say at this point, but there is too much pressure on them that they can't really say anything else without being caught out in it, so they just have to keep their head in the sand, as they have been doing for years on this issue. But it's going to get too much, and who's the only party who have anything in their manifesto about dealing with this? oh, reform, amazing.
What I won't tolerate is politicians jumping on the bandwagon simply to get attention.
I mean, for that line to come out straight after I said Reform had this in their contract is absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's clearly just for attention. That's all it's for. It's not like it was in their contract. It's not like it's something that they've been talking about for years. No. They're only talking about it now, just now for attention. There's no other argument here at all. It's, oh, I did some good things. See, I was involved in the process. Well, a lot of people involved in that process feel completely failed by it, so probably shouldn't talk about that, should you?
When those politicians sat in government for 14 long years, tweeting, talking, but not doing anything about it, now so desperate for attention.
Okay, I'm not going to lie, I've not seen too many Tories talking about it, aside from Robert Jenrick and, I imagine, allies of Robert Jenrick. But Robert Jenrick's side all seem to be the type of people who actually weren't in government for the last 14 years. Robert Jenrick at most was a junior minister. And that was only for the last few years. That was only post-Boris Johnson, really. So now you can't really have a go at Robert Jenrick like that, because he was an MP, but more of a backbencher. And when he wasn't a backbencher, he couldn't do anything. And when he realised he couldn't do anything, he resigned. And effectively got radicalised. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if the Tories keep going in the direction they are if he defects. But we're talking about years from now if that ever happens. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that, but this accusation from Starmer is just, it's another ridiculous one. Completely ridiculous. You're actually involved directly with these cases, and most people feel failed by the system. And you've done nothing to try and remedy that, from what I can tell. So, as far as I'm concerned, this speech, you can just go shove it.
That they're amplifying what the far right is saying. So that's what I say about Jess Phillips.
I'm sorry, but this is just absolute nonsense. Complete nonsense. What he's done the same mistake as the riots. Now, I want to make one thing clear. Keir Starmer's reaction to the riots are generally popular with the public. The public do not like violence in the streets. And as far as they're concerned, Starmer dealt with that. However, he's learned the wrong lesson, because obviously in one of his speeches he said it was far-right thuggery, there's no real concerns here. He's using the same playbook, and that was actually the worst part of his dealing with the riots, but nobody ever cites his speeches as being a good part of him dealing with the riots. So he's learned the wrong lesson, and he's doubling down on this issue. Yeah, it's an issue, but I've dealt with it mostly. Anyone who goes on about it is just far-right and wants attention. And so now if you want justice for these girls who have been let down and still feel let down, apparently you're far right. So now Nigel Farage and all the people who criticise him on the right have been put in the same boat yet again. Which is just how out of touch the left wing are when it comes to the political revolution that's coming. And if this is the route that Keir Starmer's going to go down, as I say, as I always knew, he's just going to be useless and needs to be kicked out as soon as possible. But that was it for his speech. As you can tell, I'm very disappointed in it, but not surprised. Anyway, with that, it's shill time. Obviously, as mentioned in the last video, there was supposed to be Antiquity stream today, but that's not actually probably coming back till the end of the month, so you're going to have to wait for that, I'm afraid. However, we're carrying on with the Tosh News and Tosh Talks, so tomorrow at 9 PM, we are doing over at the Worcester Club predictions for 2025 and putting them on a bingo card, so do come along to that. Laughing at the Guardian returns next Saturday, and videos out as and when I can make them. Apparently, I can do 2 a day sometimes, so yeah, look forward to that. If you like my channel and enjoy my stuff, become a subscriber. If you really like my channel though, do become a member or send super chats and super thanks. They all are massive help to keeping my channel going. And obviously with that, that's everything I had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.